Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and Efren Ramos is here tonight with us. Efren, nice to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
And we may have a few other people joining in a little bit later, but that's completely up to them. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. The Dolphins won, finally. We finally got something going here. And it seems to be all thanks to Dan Campbell actually reminding us what a football team is supposed to look like. Oh my.
Is somebody losing voice there?
No, that was actually my echo. Sorry about that. That was a problem. See, that's what happens. I'm so excited that I'm not paying attention to like the little details. So, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Dan Campbell, the changes that he's brought in, all the new life that seems to be going on in this Dolphins team. We're also going to talk about a few specifics. Like we're going to pick out a few things that we noticed specifically about the changes that have been made, and maybe do we agree with everything that Dan Campbell's done so far? And if not, we're going to talk about it a little bit. There's also been some comments from Mr. Richard Matthews in talking about how Dan Campbell was actually the guy who was actually doing the motivating even when Joe Philbin was around, and that in itself is a big problem in my book because well, I'll get into it later. I don't want to spoil too much. And we're going to talk about whether we think the Dolphins can maintain this because we saw the emotional high, but can they keep it going for the whole season? I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of that. But let's start, first of all, with what we do know right now. Dan Campbell showed up in Miami, and we talked to Randy McMichael about this 2 weeks ago. We took a week off to enjoy our own little bye week. And we talked to Randy McMichael about this. He said that with Campbell in charge, there was going to be a lot more running of the football. There was going to be a lot more toughness. There was going to be a lot more energy. And Randy was right on the money. This Dolphins team showed up in Tennessee against a defense that, while the team record does not display it, the defense was actually ranked up near in the top of the NFL. So it's not like we were playing a bunch of posers on defense. These guys seemed to function pretty well as a team on defense anyway. So the Dolphins made that defense look absolutely horrible. It made them look stupid. It made them look like the Dolphins defense has been looking for the past 3 weeks. Or rather, actually, let me retcon that. I'm actually going to say it's been how they've looked all season long. Like they didn't care, like they were foolish, like they had no idea what they were doing. This time, the Titans were the ones who wound up looking like that, and the Dolphins seemed to have some sort of life to them. There was energy, there was passion, there was emotions. There was actually a reason to want to watch the game. I had fun watching the football game for the first time all year. I actually had fun watching a Miami Dolphins football game, and that I don't have enough words to describe how glad I was that I could actually enjoy the game, because up until then it's been work, live tweet the games, tell everybody how bad the team is doing. I was actually able to enjoy it, guys, and I will be forever grateful to Dan Campbell for at least giving me one game so far that I can actually sit back and say, wow, did I have fun. So let me hear your thoughts about the game, and let's let it out, guys. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Speak from the heart, first of all. Let's go.
Well, I mean, obviously anybody that's a Dolphins fan had fun watching the game because they threw up, 38 points. And so we haven't seen them play a complete game like that all season. And it's been very rare for the last few seasons where we've seen them play a complete game like that where they just, had the game won by the middle of the fourth quarter. Obviously Campbell completely changed the atmosphere of the team. They clearly were a more physical team, but they also had a big component as they had Deion Sims back, and they came out intending to run the football. And I think getting Billy Turner in the lineup was a positive because he's, in my opinion, he's one of the better run blocking linemen on the team. So that was a good match. And the Titans are not a bad team, I would say, but they are not an elite team, and they are not an elite team versus the run. So it was a good game plan to run the ball on them. And, I think that it gives you a lot of optimism yet, but I still think, the Dolphins have changed, but football has not changed. And I think they won't be able to run the football that successful on a week-to-week basis. So we're still going to be needing Tannehill to continue to perform at a very high level. And I still think he has a little ways to go yet. I'd like to see a little bit more out of Ryan Tannehill. Not that he had a bad game, but I'd like to see him step up a little bit more in the future weeks, because I do think if we are going to realistically keep in the running for the season as we go on the road after the Texans games, we're going to need some really good quarterback play to be able to compete in those games. So those are my general feelings of the game, and I hope they do keep it up.
You know, in my opinion, winning is always exciting, no matter when or like how it happens. But the Titans, it felt good, because I remember 2 years ago, I think it was, where the Titans like ran the score on us, and I think they got like the high 30s or like near the 40s, and I was kind of pissed off at that because we were in a good stretch and that happened to us, and now we just gave it back to them, and you know, I feel bad for the Titans because they came at the wrong time, and you know, the Dolphins really needed that, and the spirits were high. Like, everyone looked like they were having a great time, and that's a really big breath, like a breath of fresh air. The running game being back, that was probably my favorite thing about everything. Lamar Miller, he looked great. I'm a little worried about Damian Williams and his ability to be a real between the tackles running back, and I just don't think Jonas Gray is that good. So I'm kind of looking forward to Jay Ajayi. So if we're running the ball this much and we got that little wrinkle coming, I think he comes back at week 9. He can play. Yeah, the team's going to be fun to watch at least. Maybe we won't win every game, but it's exciting to see this revitalized squad.
I'm not even expecting the Dolphins to wind up winning most of their games. I'm actually expecting them to win maybe a couple more here and there, and then they might. I'm still thinking that they're going to wind up with a losing record, because the Dolphins currently, apparently, according to statistic-wise, they actually have the toughest schedule in the NFL going forward. So it's definitely not going to be an easy road. However, because we have the toughest schedule, I'm wondering if maybe that kind of plays right into Mr. Dan Campbell's hands, because with all the preaching of toughness he's been doing, maybe he wants to have the toughest schedule to match his now toughest football team, a team that, according to Ken Wisenhunt, is too physical all of a sudden. You know what? I actually like the fact that teams are complaining about us now, because before we were pushovers, and I went on every show I went on, I made this joke and everybody seemed to laugh. It's like the Jets, we went into London and they punched us in the face and we said, "Would you like a spot of tea?" Because that's the Joe Philbin mentality. I don't even know what the Joe Philbin mentality is anymore. I don't know if there ever was a mentality at this point, considering the recent revelation from Rashard Matthews that it was still Dan Campbell trying to do all the motivating while Philbin went off and did who knows what. So that in itself bugged me to no end. But you have these players who are flipping out because they're tired of Philbin, they're tired of this, they're tired of that, they don't want to play anymore. And now Campbell shows up and suddenly they're pushing, they're shoving, they're messing with their opponents. This reminds me of some of the Dolphins of old, back when this is going to sound horrible to most people, but the days of Tony Sparano. They didn't have the best brains going on there. Then Tony Sparano was not a football genius by any means, but his players were willing to run through walls for his sake. And that, to me, is the biggest thing that you can be as a head coach. You need a team that is willing to slam their head through walls, make sure that they do everything they can, give 110, 20, 30% on that football field, and just to make sure that their coach wins. That's what Tony Sparano was good at. Now, you have that in Dan Campbell all over again. However, the difference here now is that Darren Rizzi, and this is somebody that's going to be overlooked a lot, I'm sure, because everybody's crediting Dan Campbell and they're kind of ignoring what Rizzi has done so far. Darren Rizzi is the X's and O's guy. He's the guy who told Dan Campbell, "Quick, throw the challenge flag." He ran all the way from wherever he was on the sideline to tell Dan Campbell, "Quick, throw the challenge flag." And when Campbell threw it, we wound up getting that ball on a fumble instead of just an incomplete pass. And that was thanks to Rizzi. And there were often times during the game that I saw Darren Rizzi talking with the referees instead of Dan Campbell, which tells me that Campbell trusts Rizzi enough to say, dude, you go take care of the X's and O's. I'm the one who's here to just make sure that they stay focused. And if that's the case, then I don't care. Let Dan Campbell make sure this team gets focused. I love a quote that he gave during his press conference on Monday, is that essentially after a big win, the team gets complacent, and they are notorious for that. And I agree completely. This Dolphins team, they get a big win. We saw last year after the Chargers game when we were at Web Weekend, and we went and enjoyed that game with 37-0 blowout. And then the next game, the Dolphins pretty much laid an egg. They got complacent. They got bored. They got moved. They thought they were all that, and then they got their butts kicked. Dan Campbell notices that that's a problem and is determined to keep them focused. If Rizzi's the one who does X's and O's, and then you got Laser and Saunders and Anarumo taking care of everything else, then so be it. Let the coordinators do their job, and let Dan Campbell make sure that his players keep focused. The focus, the motivation, that's the job of the head coach. The head coach is not meant to micromanage every single aspect of the team like Mr. Joe Philbin tried to do, and look how that turned out. It turned into a big fat mess that we are so glad is gone now. Let Dan Campbell do what he does. Let Rizzi do what he does, and that seems to be a really good blueprint, at least going forward. Can we beat the Texans? Maybe. I don't know yet. We have to look. We have to wait and see. There's a lot to it, but I'm liking what I'm seeing from this blueprint right now.
I think, Louis, that some of the good coaches, ironically, I think a couple of the coaches that are always thrown out for the Dolphins are John Gruden and Bill Cowher, and I don't know that they were great X's and O's coaches. I think a good coach knows how to surround himself with good staff, and you really hit it on the head. The coach's job is to get the team ready. And I remember back in Shula they would talk about, like, one day they were on the road and they didn't have a practice field, so he was doing walkthroughs in a parking lot. It was just because he wanted to make sure they knew exactly what their assignments were. And so to me it's not so much about Dan Campbell having to draw the game plan up, or Dan Campbell having to be the one that knows exactly when to throw the flag. It's him understanding, here's what I'm worried about in this game, and I'm delegating this out to specific people that I trust to do those jobs. And so to me, that's what it's all about, because I always felt Philbin's biggest weakness was his ability to motivate. When I would listen to his speeches in the locker room after a game, and it was just so dry and so boring. And I was kind of making jokes this week on Twitter, and I was saying that Dan Campbell's locker room speeches was like Leonidas from the movie 300 getting ready to go to battle, and Joe Philbin's was like that guy from Ferris Bueller that was calling attendance that just keeps going Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. It's just he was just so dry. And so I feel like Dan Campbell is absolutely a better motivator. Is he a better X's and O's guy than Joe Philbin? Maybe, maybe not, but I just don't know that matters. The biggest thing is that he understands where the football team needs to be psychologically, physically, and just feel like they're prepared when they go into the game. And I almost got to throw props to us here on the show, because if you listen to the show we did 2 weeks ago when they'd announced that Dan Campbell was going to become the coach, it was exactly what happened. Was kind of what we expected. Is we said that this is no longer going to be a team that you play and it's an easy game. And it's like, I don't know if we're going to be winning games under Dan Campbell, but you can be very sure that after the game, the other team is going to be beat up. It's going to be a very rough physical game. There's going to be guys getting hurt, and those guys are going to be laying in a tub of ice after the game going, holy cow. And so can we beat teams like the Patriots right now? That's probably asking a lot, but are they going to just lay down and play back and let the Patriots just throw the ball around like the Dolphins usually do? I don't think so. I think you're going to see them attacking the quarterback. You're going to see them attacking the players, and it's going to be rough. There's going to be fights. It's going to be physical. And Dan Campbell himself even said that. You're going to see things like that happen, because I want this team playing on the edge of control. And that's exactly what was going on in that Titans game. You're going to have a few fights. You're going to have a few questionable hits because the team is playing on edge. And I think you can't lose that. Once you start feeling like you can go around that, then you end up doing exactly what the Dolphins did the first 2 games. You get complacent.
Maybe it's just me, but there were times during the game on the sideline where Dan Campbell, you could tell, was really relying on Rizzi, and I think that might haunt us in the future. With his inexperience, never had big time decision experience there. So, I mean, I could see things going wrong sometimes, and kind of like too many chefs in the kitchen. There's a lot going on right now, and I could see how there's confusion. I am worried about a lot of the clock management stuff, and just general things that a coach would get used to after being a coach for a while. But yeah, I'm with you. It's just he's bringing this new culture, and it's really what they needed.
It's what the Dolphins needed was an infusion of passion, and every single player that has talked about this has basically said the same thing. We're willing to run through walls. It was Matt Moore who said on I don't remember where it was. Was it the Joe Rose show that he said it? Matt Moore came out and said that you ask anybody in that locker room, and they will all tell you that they are willing to do anything for Dan Campbell. And Dan Campbell said that he would be willing to bleed for his players right after the press conference against the Titans. When have you ever heard Joe Philbin mention how he's willing to do anything for his players? All I ever heard was, all right, guys, it was a great team win. It was a great team win, all three phases. And after that, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm bored. Moving on.
That was really good.
That was very good.
I can do imitations of anybody, but you saw this. You could tell it was palpable how much they cared, and Dan Campbell didn't just get the Gatorade treatment because they felt like it. Campbell gave them life. People were making fun of the tug of wars and the Oklahoma drill and all that stuff, but we knew. Well, I didn't expect the tug of war, but I mean, you know what? It worked. Who freaking cares if it looked dumb or if it looked like it was high school or if it was college or whatever? I saw people all over the place, and it drove me absolutely insane. It prompted me to write a column about it that nothing pleases these people. They were making fun of Dan Campbell. Say what?
Sorry, the guards were pulling better. You think the tug of war had something to do with that?
Maybe the tug of war rope got them to pull better. So there you go. It does have something. It does have a purpose other than just making them compete with each other. But you know what? Again, who cares? We saw the results of that tug of war rope, and even the commentators are like, "Did you guys ever have tug of war in your practices?" No, I don't think I ever did. You know what? It worked. So.
I'll tell you right now that some of the commentators, but in particular their coaches, they're nervous. They really don't want to see the Dolphins break out and win like 3 or 4 games in a row because it sets a precedence. And so everybody, when the Dolphins made this change, the stories I saw everywhere is the chances of the Dolphins getting better are slim because when you switch your coaches right away at the early of the season, the chances of your team turning around aren't very good. And the reason that typically is, I think, is because the other teams just are not that great of a football team. I think the Dolphins are a little bit more unique in that they have a lot of talented players. I mean, Ndamukong Suh, Cameron Wake, Brett Grimes, Rashad Jones, those are all Pro Bowl caliber players right now. They have an exceptionally talented wide receiving core. And, their line, Mike Pouncey's a Pro Bowl offensive tackle. So is Brandon Alberts, who's kind of getting back. And this is not
wait. Offensive tackle, Chad?
All right. Yeah, Brandon Albert.
You said Pouncey.
Oh, and I meant to say offensive tackle Brandon Albert is also getting back. And he's a Pro Bowl level player when he's back to his game. And my point being is this is not a team that's devoid of talent right now that's looking at probably having to rebuild. And they've realized that, and so they've just cleaned house. This is a team that can still be very competitive. And what coaches don't want to see is they don't want to see the Dolphins succeed in pulling their head coach out and their defensive coordinator out 4 games into the season and doing it successfully because teams like to copycat in the NFL, and nobody wants to go into next year and have their team start 1-3 when they're supposed to be 3-1 and then thinking, hey, do you remember what the Dolphins did? They just fired their head coach and they just randomly promoted some guy that was the tight ends coach, and all of a sudden they just started winning because they all loved him. That sets a precedent that, hey, maybe that works. And so all of a sudden you got these 3- and 4-year head coaches that don't get off to the right start, and it it makes it a little more appealing to other teams to fire them. And so,
well, Chad, I don't know if I can go with that comparison because like you are right in the sense that it is a copycat league. However, I'm pretty sure that I can't picture that teams are not aware enough that the Dolphins situation was a very unique situation. I'm sure that in every team there's always a couple of malcontents here and there. I'm sure Greg Jennings is a little bummed out that he's not the starter anymore since Philbin is out. But in general, teams go behind their head coaches. I can't. Maybe Pete Carroll is maybe like the last exception right now because it appears that without Dan Quinn, the Legion of Boom is the Legion of, I don't know, gloom or something like that. I guess I can go with that. Is that clever? I don't know. You guys decide.
That's pretty good.
So without Dan Quinn, suddenly Pete Carroll's not doing so good, and Russell Wilson doesn't look like this superstar, and Marshawn Lynch is not being able to do all this stuff because the defense is not supporting them the way they used to. So the Seahawks are struggling. So I guess if you wanted to do that, you could do that comparison with them, but I can't think of many teams that are willing to just, with all their players, it's not just a few. The Dolphins' entire locker room had basically, they said it quietly because they're not going to go out and say their coach sucks and they want him out, at least not publicly. But the entire locker room had essentially said, enough is enough. We don't want him anymore. Get him out, or we're not even going to. We don't even care anymore. Just get this guy out. I can't think of any other team in the NFL that the entire locker room has banded together and said, "Get this coach out of here." Maybe Greg Schiano from the Tampa Bay Buccaneer days back then, but other than that, I think it was. And even then, it wasn't a matter of just complete apathy on the part of the coach. Greg Schiano treated them like crap. Joe Philbin was just so blah that they didn't want him there anymore. He was polluting the locker room with his apathy.
Yeah, he'd lost the team. I mean, that's the thing. But, it all depends how successful Dan Campbell is because, again, the Titans, I'm not saying they're a bad football team, but this is not a high level. This is not like going in and doing this to the Green Bay Packers or the New England Patriots. And so this, to me, doesn't mean like we are suddenly back to a Super Bowl contending football team. It just means the team has taken a step in the right direction. And I've said this a few times, and I'm just personally so sick of schemes. I'm so sick of coaches coming in and thinking it's my scheme and my system that makes things successful. It's like so I don't know. It's just like they're so confident in themselves that they lose focus that winning football games is about understanding your team and what it can do. And I just felt like Joe Philbin was so hardcore set in his ways, I should say, that his system where he ran 3 wide receivers and threw the football all the time is what was successful. To the extent he was so blinded by it, they were doing those, 4 passes in a row on a goal line and throwing 75% of the time. And he was just so ingrained that it's my system that works that it's like he forgot about, no, you should be designing your plays around the players you have. And where that changed in this game, there were several points, but case in point was when they did that reverse to Jarvis Landry. I mean, that's a high school play. Yeah, that's practically a high school play, but you know what? You have Jarvis Landry, who's just a monster running kicks and with the ball in his hand when you get in space, and that's exactly what happened. He ran over 3 guys to get a touchdown, and it's that kind of stuff where it's like, I'm not worried about trying to run this precision routes and trying to beat them because I feel so confident in the routes I've drawn up on paper. No, I'm trying to figure out a way I get the ball in Jarvis Landry's hands in space. That's what my job is. And so it was a breath of fresh air to see that, and it was a breath of fresh air to see that they realized that getting Lamar Miller the football is a good thing. Just get him the ball and give him a chance, and he can really establish the running game for you. And they finally used the tight ends, and they were kind of glossing over the tight ends, for the first 2 weeks under Joe Philbin, and getting that back to a balanced football team was just so important. And they played to the strengths of the football team on both sides of the football. They just kind of went back to just common sense and play the guys that are your best players and get them in positions to succeed.
It's like, oh, what a revelation. Look, football has another dimension. It's called the running game. Oh, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know you could run the ball. I thought you just had to.
It blows my mind because I think about our team and I'm thinking, Billy Turner he's a tough guy. I mean, you hear him talk and his mentality, you watch how he plays. In there and he's a get physical in there, hit some people, and he's like a great guard to have when you want to try to power run the football. Mike Pouncey's the same thing. I mean, if anybody thinks Mike Pouncey's a pushover, you don't know who Mike Pouncey is. I mean, he's a physical guy. He's really tough, and you got those two guys on your team you can play side by side. And I think, why wouldn't you want to take Deion Sims, Jordan Cameron, Billy Turner, and Mike Pouncey? You take those four players on the field at the same time. Why wouldn't you want to try pounding the football at the team and just see if they can stop it?
Hats off to Deion Sims, by the way. It's good to have him back, wasn't it?
He makes a completely different offense when they can run that, because he's a solid player, and they can successfully run that two tight end set, which I think is vital to help them protect Ryan Tannehill and run the football.
It seems to me that the two tight end formation is actually their base offense, and without Sims, I mean, hats off to Stoneburner for what he was able to do, but he's nowhere near Deion Sims right now. And
you shouldn't have in my opinion, you shouldn't have a base offense. So that was a great base offense to run against the Titans, because they are not a great team against the run. I think they ranked like 28th against the run or something like that. But you know what? If you come up, the next week and you're suddenly playing a team that puts in like heavy linebackers and they have really heavy D tackles and their goal is to shut the run down. Well, if you're playing and that's their core players, then don't play those guys. Put 3 and 4 wide receivers out and make them play a bunch of D-backs and make sure they have good defensive back depth. And that, to me, that's what it's about, is adjusting your system based on who you're playing and what you have. And Miami can really go both directions. They should be able to come out, run 2 tight end sets for maybe 2 or 3 series, and then run 3 or 4 wide for 2 or 3 series if they really want to. They have the personnel to do it, is what I'm saying.
And I think that's what really helping out a lot, because, I mean, you look at this team and you realize that they have this personnel. I'm so glad that Billy Turner finally got into the game. That's actually one of my specifics that I'm really glad that Dan Campbell decided to insert. They put Billy Turner in the game to be a mauling, run-blocking brute who will not beat you with his feet or his hands. He'll just push you out of his way. And I remember there were people calling me out as a Twitter GM or a Twitter scout saying that Billy Turner is not nearly as good as you think he is, obviously because Joe Philbin didn't put him and he lost to Jamil Douglas and blah, blah, blah. And reasons were because practice, technique, footwork, boring.
And to me, it's not even realistic. I mean, you can put anybody. You could give me the Pro Bowl line, and if I'm going to go up against an NFL caliber team and they know that I'm throwing the football, good luck trying to stop them. Because when a team, and that's exactly what had happened to Tennessee. When you get down, or if your tendencies are so pass heavy like the Dolphins were, those teams are just rushing the passer. They're designing their blitzes, their defense. The defensive ends are playing in a fashion where they're not worried about defending their run gap. They're trying to get around the guy to get to the quarterback, and that adds such a higher degree of difficulty for an offensive lineman when they're having to block a guy who knows what's going on, like what the play is going to be. And so when you get into that Dolphins game, talk about making it easier on a guy like Billy Turner, because I don't know that Billy Turner would do that well if you asked him to block a guy who was going to pass rush him every single down. But if you tell him we're going to do a balance of run because he can move that guy in a run offense, that makes it a lot more difficult for the defense, because if that guy tries to just do a pass rush move on Billy Turner and he moves him right out of the hole and Lamar Miller blows through there, the defense then has to adjust. And suddenly you've given Billy Turner balance to help him out, do his assignments.
What I found interesting was one of the Titans players, I forgot who it was, I think it was Brian or Afko, said that the Dolphins were a completely different team than from what they saw on film. And, other defensive coordinators, they're going to take a little while to adjust to that. But do you guys think that maybe that there's going to be teams are going to figure out, oh, okay, well, now this is what they're doing and this is how we're going to play to it?
Here's my honest opinion, Efren. I think the Dolphins still have got to work on pushing the ball down the field a little bit better. They did a better job this week, and I know this has kind of been a topic, but I think it's going to be vital that the team works Devontae Parker in to get down the field. And so, because I do suspect that in this Houston game, you are going to see them come up in the box a little bit stronger to defend the run, and they're going to try to force Miami to pass a little bit. Now, Miami has the personnel to do that in the two tight end set with Jordan Cameron and Deion Sims, but I think they're going to be a little bit better served at times to get Devontae Parker down the field. And if they get him one-on-one because the teams are bringing in the safety in the box, if you get Devontae Parker in a one-on-one matchup, I'm throwing it up to him 3 or 4 times during the game down the field because I just don't think there's many corners that can handle him down the field one-on-one very well. So to me, that's going to be the vital adjustment they've got to have prepared coming forward into the coming weeks because teams are not going to allow them to run the ball as effectively as the Titans did.
And that's when it's going to come down to Ryan Tannehill having to step up a little bit because see, this is the thing now. Now we don't have an excuse. Before we could say Tannehill has no time to throw, they know what's coming and all that stuff. Not anymore. If the Dolphins are truly committed to making sure that there's going to be balance in this offense, and I think that with the Al Saunders influence and the Dan Campbell wanting to be tough and all that stuff, with that sort of influence, I believe they are committed to that. That means that there's no more excuses for Tannehill. He needs to start playing better because we've given him everything he needs. We gave him a run game. We gave him all the weapons he could want. Now is the time for us to see just what Tannehill is made of. And I think that this is the time now where we're going to see his true colors. I don't know if maybe the Al Saunders brought in some new techniques that made some miscommunications. The first one bounced off Jordan Cameron's hands, and that got turned into a tip drill. And I'm hearing some people say that the second interception was actually Tannehill's fault, not Cameron's. But you could look at it either way because we don't know how the play was actually drawn up.
On either one of those plays with Lewis, they were not improper reads on the defense. They were execution issues. The first one obviously hit Jordan in the hands, and it was a tip for an interception. And the other one, whether it was Tannehill's fault or Jordan Cameron's fault, he turned the opposite direction of where Tannehill threw it. So, not that I'm saying that gives Tannehill a pass, but I'm saying that's not a guy that misread the defense and threw a bad pass into double coverage and got it picked off. That's not what had happened. But what they did that I really liked is they, again, what are your talents of the players you have? What can they do, and how do you put them into position to succeed? And they did a couple designed runs with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, and I think that's a great thing to do. Just send him outside the pocket and tell him to take off because it's something he can do well. And again, that puts the defense in the position where you got to be careful if you're blitzing linebackers or if you're blitzing corners, because if you blitz into a designed run with Tannehill, he'll rip off 30, 40 yards on you if you're cleared out the side he's running to with a blitz. And so it keeps the defense honest, and I think that settles Tannehill down a little bit. He's a good guy to have moving around outside the pocket from time to time to make plays with his legs and arms combined. And I think, Philbin, they spent a ton of time getting him trained as a pocket passer, and Tannehill can, operate as a pocket passer, but don't just have him be a pocket passer. He's not Phillip Rivers, where that's all. Phillip Rivers can't take off and run with the football, or Peyton Manning can't take off and run with the football. But
Peyton's going to do some bootlegs every once in a while, though.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He's a running quarterback when you need him to be, and I think you've got to work that into game plans. I'm not suggesting you run him 10 times a game or anything like that, but I like the fact that, for a play or two, you have him take off. Just so it keeps that defense honest. It keeps them thinking that he's going to run a time or two a game, so whoever's responsibility it is to have containment, it makes them play honest. I mean, that's really what it had gotten so bad at the end there for the Dolphins where it felt like every play they were running a play where the defense was in position to defend it, and so you had to execute it so flawlessly because they were already defending the play you were running. That's just what it felt like.
Yeah, I hope Dan Campbell and Tannehill will talk about fumbles, because I'm always a little bit nervous when Tannehill runs. I don't know about you guys, but just a little bit when he's running with the ball. There's a part of me that's like, yeah.
Not me, Efren, and I'm going to tell you why. Because most of the fumbles that happen to Tannehill are happening in the back when he doesn't happen to see the guy that's about to hit him.
Yep, coming from behind. Oh yeah.
At least when he's actually running with the football, he can at least brace himself and hold on to that ball. I remember he fumbled while he was running with the ball when Chad and I went to the Dolphins game last year when they were playing against Buffalo, and I remember that. But that's really the last time I can think of where Tannehill fumbled where he wasn't actually getting blindsided by somebody.
Yeah, well, I mean, he tucks. I mean, fortunately for him, he played wide receiver in college, so I think he's a little bit better at ball security, knowing to get that ball put away when you're on the run. But he's gonna be a risk for injury and fumble if you get him in unfavorable positions. You don't want to get him blown up. And so, and he played it. The first run, he ran down the field, and I don't think he took a big shot. And the second time he ran, he actually slid, which is exactly what you want to see. You're not trying to. If you're coaching him, you're telling him, you take what you have, and if that's not there, unless you're at the game decision, it's fourth down and you have to make it, you don't take on a shot from the safety or something when you don't have to. That's vital. But Tannehill's pretty good about not getting hit really hard.
And that's what we balance again. Balance. Like we can try to come up with all these different kinds of stats. We can come up with all these kind of different ways to look at it in a contextual way. But really, when it boils right down to it, balance. This podcast right so far can pretty much be summed up in one word. It's balance. That's what we saw Sunday. We saw a team that realized, you know what, passing it over 75% of the time just isn't going to work. And we saw a team that finally realized we have a former 1,000-yard rusher on our football team that we are not letting carry the ball less than 10 times a game. That's nuts. I believe the commentators mentioned, I don't remember, that it was they've run the ball less in the last 50 years. Nobody's run the ball less in 50 years. That's insane. That's literally it's almost like Joe Philbin had dementia and he forgot that he was in Miami instead of Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers did not follow you to Miami. You can't do that. You can't go with just pass the ball all game long. And even Aaron Rodgers has Eddie Lacy to run the ball and give some semblance of balance. There is Phillip Rivers, give credit to Phillip Rivers. He almost got those Chargers to win the game for him. He threw the ball 65 times. That's insanity. And it almost seemed like Joe Philbin was determined to have Tannehill beat that record. 65 times for Phillip Rivers, and they almost won. Give credit to Phillip Rivers. He really is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But, again, just that alone is enough to remind you need balance or you're not going to make it.
Yeah, you can't win consistently without it. And again, to me, it's about your schemes and your predictability. And I don't have an issue with coming out and at some points, especially if you're playing a team that's really banged up in the secondary, trying to set the run up with the pass and coming out throwing the football, 2 or 3 times in a row, and then trying to rip off a run when they're overplaying the pass. I don't have an issue with that, but you can't expect that scheme to work against whoever you play, no matter who they are, what they're doing, what the conditions are environmentally. You got to change your game plan into where you're at and who you're playing. And that was just something that Philbin was so set in his system against doing that I remember when they'd be playing in the wind, I don't if you remember that game in Buffalo a year or two ago that they lost, that year they would have made the playoffs and they lost to Buffalo and they lost to the Jets and didn't make the playoffs. They were trying to throw the football in harsh conditions. Now, I was thinking that whole game, why are you not coming in 2 tight end sets and just power running that football and trying to get some movement going? Because it's nuts to be trying to throw the football in this. But he was just so set that, no, my system works no matter what. And now they are suddenly a very unpredictable team because nobody really knows what they're going to do with Campbell and those coordinators in there. They're not somebody that teams have a lot of film that they know what to expect.
And that's what the Houston Texans are going to have to watch out for. And let's talk a little bit about the Texans. Web weekend is coming, guys. Yay! So we're going to go watch that game. So no live tweets Sunday, guys. Sorry. But the Texans are not going to be a walk in the park. They have J.J. Watt. They have Vince Wilfork. They have Arian Foster at running back. DeAndre Hopkins is turning into a young star in this league. So credit Rob Prophet. He keeps reminding everybody that he thought he was going to be #1 overall pick, and they should have been. So congrats, Rob. You got that. You nailed that one. So the Texans have a lot of pieces. They don't have a great quarterback, but they have pieces that can make things work. But the biggest issue is J.J. Watt. And one might think that we can have Brandon Albert take care of him, but that's really not the way it's going to work, I don't think, because according to I found this article that pretty much sums up exactly where J.J. Watt lines up most of the time. He's at left end most of the time. So that means he's going to be dealing with Juwan James, I believe. That is a huge, huge responsibility that we're putting on Juwan James' shoulders. If we could somehow make Brandon Albert play right tackle, I wish we would, because I'm scared to death of J.J. Watt. Jadeveon Clowney was out last week with an ankle injury. I don't expect him to be playing, and even if he does, I don't expect him to be playing at full power, so I'm not worried about him. But it doesn't matter where J.J. Watt lines up. That's a scary thought, and especially if it's going to be against Juwan James and Billy Turner, because those two, I don't think they can hold back J.J. Watt. Albert might have been able to slow him down, but I don't think there's a force in nature that can stop J.J. Watt.
Well, I mean, it comes down. I would have a quote for J.J. Watt, because he probably is the best defensive player, at least in the front seven in the NFL right now.
No doubt.
And there was a quote that Bill Parcells had said this is when Howie Long was one of the elite players in the NFL, and his comment was, "You are aware where he lines up on every play, or he will ruin what you're trying to do." And that's exactly what Miami is going to do, is what they should do, I should say, is when they come up to the line of scrimmage, you're aware of where J.J. Watts is at. And my suggestion would be, don't leave him in many one-on-one situations, whether it's Brandon Albert or Juwan James. If you see where he's at, I mean, you want to have your running back sliding over to help, or you want to have a tight end move in and at least chip him, with the offensive lineman. Just don't expect those linemen to block him all game long. If you leave him one-on-one all game, he's going to give him the Cameron Wake treatment that the Titans ended up. If you expect an offensive tackle to handle him all game long, he's going to beat him 4 or 5 times and probably cause 1 or 2 turnovers and affect the outcome of the game. And so you may have to limit a little bit what you do on offense, but you cannot allow him to take the game over. And the best way to neutralize him will be use the screen game in his direction, run the other direction, and run a number of plays that do not allow J.J. Watts to be very impactful on them. And hopefully then you will get enough balance that then you can, at time to time, put him one-on-one, but just don't do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, there's going to be probably another heavy running game for the Dolphins, pretty much just to ward off J.J. Watt and keep Tannehill upright. But I'm
running
also
right into the bowling ball, Efren.
Run it away from that monster.
Not Watt, but Wilfork.
Oh no, that guy.
The bowling ball on legs.
Jeez, man.
I'm not. I mean, he was obviously a great player, but I don't think he has the pass rush capability that he used to have. But
I'm worried about run defense.
Run defense, he's going to be pretty stout, but if Miami runs a lot of what they're capable of doing, and that's a lot of traps and sweeps and stuff, because as terrible as much as I don't like Dallas Thomas as an interior blocker, especially on pass blocking or moving players and run blocking, Dallas Thomas is very good at traps and pulling on sweeps and screens. And so that's a great way to neutralize the defensive line of the Texans, is to do that. So there is no question in my mind that the Texans are going to be challenging for the Dolphins just to score on. They're not going to be as easy to score on, I think, as the Titans were. But on the flip side, the the Texans' offense is somewhat limited. They don't have the running game they used to have when Arian Foster was at his peak, and they definitely have some uncertainty at their quarterback. So I don't feel like they're a team that you have to match up and feel like you need to come out and score 14 points in the first quarter or have no chance. So Miami has to play somewhat smart football, and I wouldn't be afraid to, like I said, do some plays that are designed to remove J.J. Watt from the game, do some run-heavy runs away from him, do some screens, do some sweeps to the outside, and keep it a little tight and just see how the Texans handle that. And if you're effectively moving the ball, great. If you're not, I just don't feel like they're a team that's going to throw up 14, 21 points on them in the first half.
You're talking about the Texans?
Yeah, I don't with their quarterback situation, I don't feel like they're going to be just airing it out. I think that would be foolish on their part because Miami's much better at pass defense than they are at run defense. And so if you're going to be
That's
dropping,
a bad thing, Chad.
Well, it is, but I don't feel like the Titans are this power run offense. Or sorry, the Texans are not a power run offense like they used to be, and I don't feel like they're a team that can throw the ball real effectively. So they're not a high level offense. I guess that's what I'm saying. And so knowing that on the defensive or on the offensive side of the ball, I don't feel like you have to come out and feel like you need to just be throwing the ball all over the field and trying to score really quickly because you're going to have to try to get into a shooting match to keep up with them. I think you're much better served not to make a bunch of mistakes. What you don't want to have happen is J.J. Watt to come around, strip the ball, and get a turnover for them, or you don't want Ryan Tannehill to throw a pick six, in the first or second series or something like that. So I would kind of come out, get your footing, try to power on the football a little bit on them, and throw some conservative passes, that sort of thing. That's what I would anticipate you'll see Miami do.
Don't use the word conservative. It makes people upset.
Oh, conservative meaning I don't think you want to go 3 or 4 wide and expect the offensive line to hold the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds for Tannehill to throw the ball 30, 40 yards down the field. I think you'd be much better served with quick routes to Matthews and Landry, that kind of stuff. Use your tight ends effectively in your double tight sets and look for that kind of stuff. I think they'd be playing right into the strength of the Texans to try to remove the tight ends from the game and try to force their offensive linemen to handle probably the premier pass rusher in the league one-on-one. I think you'd be playing right into what they do well.
Well, I don't think the Dolphins are going to have to worry about dealing with the possibility of the tight ends being removed from the game, especially with Dan Campbell being a tight end. So he's more than aware of exactly how valuable the tight end position is. And just looking down the list I have here, we have the likes of J.J. Watt. We have that's dangerous. We have Vince Wilfork. He's dangerous. Brian Cushing might be a problem. I'm not sure. I don't. Is Brian Cushing out for the year? At this point, I'm looking up names as I go.
I don't know. I don't.
I'm
feel
looking
like
up names as I go.
I know out of college he was really good and he's had some good games in the NFL, but he's had a lot of severe injuries. I don't know that he's a dominant football player. I mean, I'm not saying he's easy or anything, but I would much rather play against the linebackers and the defensive backs primarily in the Texans game than not let their defensive line dictate the game. That would be my strategy.
Well, Kareem Jackson, their starting corner, is going to be out. So that's the report that we're getting is the most likely he will not play in Week 7 against the Dolphins. So that's a plus at least. Kevin Johnson, I believe he's the rookie star that a lot of people liked. He was the Wake Forest one, I believe. He's a rookie. He hasn't done all that terrific in the time he's played, at least not from what my Twitter people have told me. He's done is aight. He's not going to do anything really that great. Looking down the list, once you remove J.J. Watt and Vince Wilfork and Cushing from the picture, and then you don't have Kareem Jackson there anymore, suddenly the Texans don't seem that scary, which, at least on defense, that's a good thing. Then you have on offense, you have Arian Foster. He's a legit running back when he gets the ball in his hands. Then you have DeAndre Hopkins.
Scares me. That's who scares me the most. Yes, because I think that, the Texans are a completely different team when Foster plays. Even in the record, the Texans' record with Foster in there is better than without because he just changes everything. And I could see him exploiting us in the passing game too. And you guys got to keep in mind the last two games that he played, that's him getting back. This is the beginning of the season for him,
Well,
and
remember that
he's
we're not Joe
very
Philbin's dog.
prone to break out. And
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Ephraim, but this might sound a bit morbid,
well,
but
think about
this
I'm
is
just saying the running backs that we played last week were quite inferior to what we're about to get coming up. So
your Arian
I'm just
Foster.
saying he's the scariest person.
Yeah, I understand, man. Let's look at it like this: we're not Joe Philbin's Dolphins anymore. Now we are. Now we're Dan Campbell's Dolphins, and Eldon Jensen for our team, our site wrote up a awesome fight song just for Dan Campbell. But the point of the matter is that you have Arian Foster, yeah, sure, but he's only useful to you if he's not hurt. If we can hurt him, and that's going to sound awful because I don't really wish injury on anybody, but if Arian Foster is really that injury prone, then what's to stop a Dan Campbell Miami Dolphin team from knocking Foster right out of the game all over again? And I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying it very well could happen. I'm more worried about DeAndre Hopkins than I am of Arian Foster, and the reason why is because Chad, you said that we're better in the pass offense, in the pass defense, and the run defense. I honestly don't believe that. I believe that where we actually struggle the most is in the pass defense, because it seems to me that at least if Campbell's the one in charge now, this front seven seems set to go back to what we were hoping they would be. However, the secondary is still a mess, and that is my biggest fear, because if Brent Grimes' knee isn't back in action, I mean, he made a great play on the diving interception, but you could tell all game long Grimes was not Brent Grimes. He was a shadow of himself because his knee was all messed up. If he winds up dealing with Hopkins and his knee is not at full strength, I'm going to be worried about Hoyer or Mallet just airing it out all game long, and that kind of scares me more than Arian Foster.
I would much. I obviously we're disagreeing, but I would much rather have that, because I mean you saw in the Titans game when we forced the Titans to adjust their game plan to where they had to pass. Cameron Wake took the game over. Olivier Vernon was coming in there, even Sue, and Cam Wake is elite. He's an absolute elite pass rusher. He's an average at best run defender on the defensive end, and Olivier Vernon isn't a lot better at run defense either. And so if you allow the Texans to come out and run their full offense where they can mix the run in generously with the pass, it's going to be very difficult for us to defend that, because the reality for our team is, and this is a reality we're going to have to deal with the rest of the season, is we do not have great linebacker talent. We do not have great range out of our linebackers. They're not real solid run defenders out of our linebackers, and so what we really want to avoid at all costs is having a lot of matchups where our linebackers have to stop Arian Foster, in space and those sort of matchups. And if you can get the Texans in the frame of mind where they need to throw the ball down the field, I want them dropping Ryan Mallett or Brian Hoyer back with Cam Wake pass rushing with Rashad Jones, Brent Grimes, and those guys in the secondary. That, to me, that's a much better matchup for us, because as you saw in that Titans game, when Cam Wake's allowed to not worry about stopping the run and can just tee off, he creates turnovers and creates havoc. So that's my ideal scenario. But
that's up to the offense, Chad, not the defense.
Well, yeah, the offense is going to have to score points. They absolutely are going to have to. And that's true of anything. And in the NFL, it's a has or has not league with your quarterback. And so this season, not necessarily this particular game, but this season is going to come down to whether or not Ryan Tannehill actually is a
What did you say?
It's going to come. This season is going to come down.
No. You called him Tannehill.
Oh, Tannehill.
Oh my God! No.
Tannehill.
No. Thank you. Oh my God, Tannehill.
It's going to come down to whether or not he is realistically a top 15 to top 10 level quarterback. And if he is, Miami can get right back in the thick of it, because you're going to get into those scenarios where the running game maybe does not work that well, and you run it on first and you get a couple, and you run it on second, and now you're coming up to these 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 6s, and that's when you need him to execute. You need to have him hit his passes and throw the ball well, and that's what it's going to be about. Or if you do end up having a turnover and you get down 10-0 or 14-0, and you do have to go into your pass offense, can Ryan Tannehill lead this team back? And the reality is he has moments where he looks good, but he has yet to be that guy where you felt like if you gave him the ball at the end of the game and all he has to do is lead the team down the field for a score, you feel good. And you remember last year when we lost to the Packers, when we gave the ball back to them, I don't think there was anybody that was a Dolphins fan that says, "Are you kidding me? We're giving the ball back to Aaron Rodgers to run the 2-minute drill on us to decide the game." And that's what we need out of Ryan Tannehill. We want to feel like he's the guy, he's the man that can make some magic happen when you have to have it. And so that's really what it's going to come down to.
Chad, I think we're overestimating the Texans defense a little bit. I'm just looking at their scores, and I mean, they allowed 27, 17, 9 to the Buccaneers. They won that game, but 21 points, 27, 20. So teams get up there on them, and I don't know if it's the secondary or what, but if the Dolphins can keep it, if they have to make it a dirty game, which I think they will, so be it. But
yeah, and I think that justifies going in there. And like I said, I think the biggest thing you want to avoid is letting J.J. Watts take the game over, and you don't want to let him be getting in there causing disruption that might force Tannehill to throw an interception or might have Tannehill fumble the football. There's nothing wrong with just game planning around him and trying to beat the Texans that way. And if you have to from time to time risk it, and you want to try to throw a pass when it looks like maybe an opportune time to do it, and you're going to let your tackle take one-on-one, that's fine, but don't do a lot of it in that game and let one player disrupt everything. Make them beat you as a team, because as you said, with Kareem Jackson out, and as you see other teams are putting points up, I think if you just run your offense a little more balanced and make sure you're giving help against J.J. Watt, I think you can score on them.
To get back to the offensive side of the ball, not the offensive, the defensive side of the ball. Again, this is actually a really good thing, because I'm glad we're talking about this now. Again, you talked about how you'd rather have them in pass defense, and I'd rather have them in run defense, but you brought up the linebackers, and I'm actually glad you did, because if we go down the list of linebackers, let's be perfectly frank about this. If you had your choice, where would you rather have Kelvin Shepherd? Because we know he's going to be the starter. Would you rather have Shepherd in coverage or defending the run?
Ugh.
Neither.
Okay, well, neither is not an option. There's no C here. There's A or B.
Well, the reality is Kelvin Shepherd is not going to defend. If you're in a situation where they're going to have to pass, like 3rd and long, or they're down 14 points going into the middle of the 3rd quarter or something, then Kelvin Shepherd will not be in the game, because they're not going to be lining up in double tight sets and power run sets in those scenarios, so they're going to have him off the field. Now, if you're in situations where I'm talking about where your offense has not put points on the board, or the game is close, so you're allowing them to run an offense where they can run the football, then you have to have Shepherd on there, because you got to be able to stop the run. I don't know. I mean, the problem I have with Shepherd, I would probably rather have Shepherd trying to stop the run, honestly, because I just don't like his range, and so I feel like there's very few offensive players that he could cover one-on-one. Even tight ends, I think he would struggle to cover them one-on-one. So that pretty much limits Shepherd to being a zone coverage sort of player, because he's just not fast enough to do any other kind of coverage.
Well, Shepherd is pretty much these tight ends nowadays. It's very hard for linebackers to cover them at all, because tight ends have turned into these super fast monsters, and there's very few prototypical tight ends back and out there anymore anyway. But I see your point. The thing is that it seems to me that Shepherd did not look as bad as he has all year long, and I think a lot of it has to do with the front seven. Shepherd made a good play behind the line in the Titans game, and I had to shake my head and blink for a few seconds. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that Kelvin Shepherd? And like, yes, it is. So Shepard as a run defender is not as bad, not nearly as bad as him as a pass defender. Then you have Jelani Jenkins. He's good in pass coverage. However, you saw him shoot the gap and stop the run real quickly in that one in the Titans game. That showed his ability in run defending. Then you have Koamisi, who's pretty much your all-around. I'm a jack of all trades and a master at none. And then you have Rashad Jones, who has become this elite run defending safety in the box. And we all know that his specialty is not pass coverage. It's more along the lines of being a ball hawk and then doing run defense. So we have all these pieces that are built to stop the run. But I think what the thing is that we're kind of debating two different subjects. I'm talking about overall mix, just in general. You're talking more along the lines of situational football. I agree. If it's a situational football and we're ahead in the game and we're just teeing off, then absolutely I feel like our pass defense is better because we're allowing our pass rushers to do just that, pass rush. But if it's in general and we've just started the game, I would say that our run defense is better than our pass defense.
Houston's pass catchers as a whole, not that great, aside from DeAndre Hopkins. And I think, if we can lock the rest of the receiving core down, which isn't that much of a stretch, we can have Rashad Jones covering a lot of the run. And that way, Arian Foster really isn't that much of a headache if you have Rashad Jones spying on him the whole time.
And again, as I said earlier, it's a quarterback-driven league. You absolutely, I want them to try to beat us with Ryan Mallett or Brian Hoyer and not Arian Foster. Because I know Arian Foster, when he's fully healthy, can be a Pro Bowl level running back who can give our linebackers fits if he's getting any kind of lanes. Whereas we have an inexperienced defensive backfield. I mean, Brett Grimes and Rashad Jones, in my opinion, are both Pro Bowl level players. And absolutely, I want Ryan Mallett or Brian Hoyer trying to throw the ball on those guys a lot with Cameron Wake rushing them. I mean, that is the ideal scenario for us because it has all of our Pro Bowl players doing what they're best at. Now, in terms of them running the football, if we come in and attempt to stop the run, Miami has improved their personnel package a little bit than what they were doing before Coyle left. And what I saw them doing is they were pulling Cam Wake out of the game, and they were putting in Derek Shelby in his place. And I think they did maybe a Fide a little bit. I need to go back and watch the film. But the reality is that Derek Shelby or Terrence Fide are better run defenders than Cameron Wake. And I think what Miami probably has decided, or that they're realizing, is you are better off to give up what Cameron Wake can provide in pass rush when it's 1st and 10, 2nd and 3 and downs like that, where they're much more likely to run the football. You're better off to put in a defensive end that is better at stopping the run and not as good at rushing the passer. And then when they get into those scenarios where it's going to be 3rd and 5 or more, or again later in the game where they need to pass, you want Cam Wake in there the whole time, pinning his ears back and trying to create havoc.
So, and yeah, that's I think that's where we got our wires crossed. Is like you're talking more along the lines of situational football. I'm just talking the team in general.
Right, and I just had to touch on one thing you said real quick, Lewis, because I've been waiting for this all year, and that was the Jelani Jenkins shooting in there on a blitz, and people were going off about, well, Ndamukong Suh's getting cut. He's getting cut, and teams have cut him his whole career because he's so difficult to block one-on-one. So when you do block him one-on-one, you try to cut him. And that is exactly what you do when you have a team that's doing that frequently. If you have a team that's trying to isolate Ndamukong Suh one-on-one, when a lineman goes low like that, that lineman has essentially removed his ability to block. And so you shoot a linebacker right in behind Ndamukong Suh, that's exactly what happens. Is that lineman is laying on the ground and that linebacker blows right through there. And so I was just waiting for that. And I don't know if that was a problem with Coyle or not, but I was been saying all year long, blitz behind Suh all game because they're either double teaming him or they're cutting him. And so make them not change your scheme so they can't do that. If they continue to cut him, you're going to be sending linebackers in there free, blowing up their plays. And so then they're going to realize we've got to actually engage our guy and keep our linemen on our feet because otherwise people are coming right through like a sieve. So I that might be your first example of an improvement with Coyle being gone.
And you have, and just to touch on Ndamukong Suh, I mean, he was absolutely. He didn't get any stats really, but he did so much for the Dolphins against the Titans. And the box score will never tell you this, but I think one of the biggest reason that Wake was able to do so much against Mariota, besides the fact that Mariota's knee was messed up and he couldn't run for it, is that Sue was doing what we expected him to do all year long. He ate up the double team, and once the Dolphins wound up scoring, Wake was able to attack, and he got one-on-ones all game long.
And only
And
30
it wound
snaps.
up with it ended up with 4 sacks. If I think Sue was messing around when he said that, let's see if we can get Wake to 20 sacks. If the Dolphins can continue scoring in that way, and they can rig it so that teams have to play from behind, and Sue eats the double team, who knows? Maybe Wake will get another 4 sacks. It's not like Brian Hoyer is going to be running very far, or Ryan Mallett.
It's Brian Hoyer. He's starting.
Okay,
Cameron Wake did it in 30 snaps. All he had was 30 snaps. He had 4 sacks, 4 tackles.
And Campbell said he should have had 6.
He is an elite pass rusher. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league. And if you can get him in a scenario where he does not have to have run defending responsibility,
Yeah.
Good luck trying to have a tackle block him. And so if you have to double team Sue, which most teams do, if you're going to stop
If you're not,
him
you're
from,
stupid.
Well, yeah, you saw last year when Miami tried to do it with Pouncey, and he just was, destroying things. So if you're going to have to double team Sue, and you're going to have to help on Wake, I mean, you've already given up 4 players essentially on your offense to handle those 2. And so, God, whoever else is in there should be having some fun because they are getting preferred matchups. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, it's just all this common sense thing. It's just unreal that this isn't like high level coaching where it's these really creative plays. This is just like fundamental. Like, all right, we've got Ndamukong and Sue. They're cutting him or they're double teaming him. Why are we not blitzing players through that gap all game long? And now all of a sudden that Coyle is gone, you're suddenly seeing it. So it's just mind-boggling.
It seems to me that it's common sense that's going on with Dan Campbell and Darren Rizzi and those guys.
Yeah,
and,
wasn't that his common sense nod? How many times was Dan Campbell just sitting there like nodding his head up huge?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Like, that's right. I'm like,
let me take off Omar for a minute. This is how we do it. That's how you play football. So we're gonna start wrapping up the show real quick very soon. But I want to talk about this real quick. We talked about this earlier. The adrenaline high that we saw this football team show. We saw this amazing amount of energy, this amazing amount of passion, this fire in their belly. And we've heard Dan Campbell say that he wants to make sure that that intensity keeps up. But speaking honestly, my question to you two would be this. Do you realistically think that the Dolphins can keep this level of intensity up? Because there's 2 ways to burn out. There's the Philbin way where there was never a fire to begin with, or is there a potential for this Campbell way to burn them out the other way, is that they use up so much energy that by the time it really counts, there's just nothing left?
I don't believe that. I think the great coaches and great teams, they have that week in and week out, and so I think it's a great thing that they're going to bring that intensity. Now, where you do have to be somewhat careful is learning to play with controlled intensity, and clearly Olivier Vernon is a player in particular that's struggling, and you want to go in there and you want to play rough, hard-nosed football. You do want to play on the edge, and so you are from time to time going to get a late hitter. You are going to get in a fight, but Olivier Vernon is somebody that he tends to lose his awareness of what's going on in the game, and so on his hit that was very controversial, I personally don't believe he was attempting to hurt Mariota, but I do believe he was intending to hit him even though the ball had come out, and so that is a situation where I like that. If we're playing Tom Brady, I want them risking a 15-yard penalty or 2 hitting him because we need to make him uncomfortable. However, when it's 3rd and 12 or something along that lines, that's a situation where it's not smart. Don't be hitting the quarterback on a play where it's a very low percentage conversion, and that to me is game awareness. And so that is where Dan Campbell is. That's the question: is can he get these players playing on the edge of control, but not have them do stupid penalties to hurt themselves? You can't continuously give teams 15-yard personal fouls on 3rd and 12. That's how you lose football games. So that's going to be the challenge: is keeping that edge, but not allowing it to cost you games.
I'm optimistic about where the team is headed, but more so in a, locker room and culture kind of way. I don't really see them winning too many games, but at least they're going to be, trending up, and people are going to want to come to Miami, and the slowness of the Philbin era, that's over, and now let's look ahead, and that's what I'm excited for. It's going to be tough for a lot of these games. We're going to get out-coached. It's going to happen. We just don't have the experience there. And, I don't think that... Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying about the out-coach thing, but I think we're overplaying it a little bit because, again, people are only looking at Dan Campbell. But that doesn't mean that Laser and Al Saunders and Anarumo and Rizzi don't know what they're doing with schemes and plans and all that stuff. Campbell, I said it earlier, Campbell is there to make sure the players themselves keep focused and motivated and don't get complacent. Rizzi and Saunders and Laser and all those guys, they're the ones making the schemes, and I think they can be good coaching X and O's style. And then then once you have your plan involved and with those guys, you just let Campbell remind them, get out there and do it.
I hope you're right, but
the league is balanced.
Volatility there. There's so many different people involved, and they're bound to butt heads at some point, right? There's way too many people there making important decisions, and
I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think anybody's in a position right now that's going to challenge Dan Campbell in there, and I think he has a very clear job detail, and I think he is using Izzo a lot, and I don't have a problem with it. I don't want a coach that is trying to talk to a guy upstairs on an instant replay versus paying attention to what's going on in the game. That makes complete sense to me that Rizzo is doing that, and I don't have any problem that Rizzo is trying to help him call a timeout in a special teams 4th down situation and those sorts of things. Now, if things start going south, if the Dolphins are really struggling, then it will get interesting because you're going to see like who's going to be, shouldering the blame. It's easy to feel all good about yourself and what you're doing and how you're preparing when you're winning, but you start questioning then when you're losing. And so that's when Dan Campbell may feel inclined to have even more control of things. So, if Izzo is trying to help him and it's a bad call, it ends up in a turnover or something that doesn't work out, Dan Campbell may feel more inclined the next round then to not rely on him. So, I mean, there are possibilities it could go that way, but I don't feel like I felt with Joe Philbin that the coaches, even last season, there was a lot of rumbling that the coaches wanted to go for it in that situation, or the coaches didn't want to run that play, but that's what Philbin wanted. I don't feel like anybody's going to question what Campbell's doing.
I don't think Campbell's even really worrying about it. That's just it. I don't think Campbell so much is making decisions so much as he is just making sure that the team is focused. Because if you watch his press conferences, it's sad trying to watch him figure out schemes and schematics and all that stuff. Like, he was trying to remember. He spent like 2 minutes sitting there trying to remember what the play was exactly on a specific part of the game that they played that made a good play. He couldn't even remember what it was because that wasn't his thing. He's not an X's and O's guy. He probably never will be an X's and O's guy. What he is and people are going to hate me for making this comparison. He's a bigger, stronger, more relatable Tony Sperano. He really is. He's not a football genius. I don't think he ever will be a football genius, and that's why he said that he will implicitly trust Rizzi, because Rizzi, he's pretty fiery himself, but he is more of a schematic guy. Rizzi has head coaching experience from college. He knows the X's and O's part of it. He knows the schemes. He knows all this stuff. Laser knows what he's doing. Saunders brought in the I formation. At least that's what we're being told. So I'm willing to believe it at this point because there was never an I formation before Saunders really showed up. I mean, they tried it once in a blue moon and it didn't work, but that you saw a lot more I formation with Saunders all of a sudden. So I'm willing to bet that's the case. If Saunders and Laser are running the offense, that's their salute. That's their spot. And then you have Anarumo working in the defense, which is also fine. That's his spot. Then you have Rizzi making sure that all the X's and O's are in order, and then Campbell makes sure that the players themselves are focused. I like that blueprint. I don't think Campbell is the head coach by name only. Really, it's the coordinators and Rizzi making sure that all the schemes are in place. But Campbell does have the most important job in the sense that once Rizzi and those guys make the scheme, Campbell has to make sure they execute.
Yeah, I suspect he has his input on what he wants, and so I could go in there and talk to Bill Laser and say, look, I want to run the ball X number of times. I want the ball in Lamar Miller's hands this number of times. Can you get them ready this week in your playbook? Can you make sure you bring plays in that have 8 power runs available, and whether you want the I formation or whatever, and then I can say I want to see the ball get into Jarvis Landry's hands a few times, and I want to see Ryan Tannehill run this many times, but not be the guy that's like going to do the X's and O's of the plays. You're basically going to Bill Laser and say, look, I know you've got hundreds of plays ready. You've got these guys ready to execute X number of plays that they've been practicing all offseason and training camp. Here's the type of plays I want to see used in this game. Can you get them ready? And I believe that's probably how he approaches it. I highly doubt he's the one out there calling the plays or trying to design where they're going or scheme it or anything like that. But I think he does have a general control of the game plan and how I want to attack this team.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We can already tell that Campbell's toughness has been infused into them. You can tell that much. So yeah, I think that's a fair comment to make. But in the sense of who's in charge, in all technicality, it is Campbell. But this is a team of coaches. There is no one guy running it all. That was Joe Philbin, and that's why it didn't work.
Oh yeah, and to be fair, I mean Dan Campbell has never been a head coach. And he found out a day after the game that he had 2 weeks to be ready to be a head coach. And so first thing that I say is somebody that's smart is somebody that realizes and admits they don't know what they're doing that well, and they use the people around them that can help them. And so I think Dan Campbell did exactly what you would want him to do, and he leaned on the people that have some experience, and he brought in some people he trusts that know what they're doing to help him out. And I mean that's what coaching is all about. If you take the Cam Cameron route and try to just do it all, then you don't do anything good. And so you're better off to put a staff together that works functionally well together.
The smartest people in the world, I think, are the ones who are smart enough to realize that they're not smart enough to handle a situation and they need help. Joe Philbin acted like the smartest guy in the room. That makes him the dumbest. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I agree. That's, you can own your own house. It's your house. You make the decisions. But you know what? I don't know anything about running wire or electricity, so I don't do it. I hire an electrician when I need that stuff done because they know what they're doing. And so I know that's kind of funny, but that's a similar concept.
It is a similar concept.
If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Have somebody that knows what they're doing do it instead, and you get somebody that you trust to do it.
At the end of the day, too, it's about the people who are out on the field. And going into this season, we were excited not about the coaching staff. We were all excited about the roster. And it seems like Dan Campbell has, brought this roster back to life, and we're excited again. And it's really about the players, and that's what I'm most excited for. Because now we're going to get the most out of these guys because they got a coach they want to play for.
And one that is willing to realize that each player has their own individual person and they have their own strengths and weaknesses. It seems to me the biggest thing that Philbin's absence has done is that they've realized that the square peg goes in the square hole and not the other way around. There's no more try to squeeze something in that doesn't belong.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
All right, so we're gonna wrap this show up. Do you and Efren Chad have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I don't. I think Efren hit it on the head. I don't think you want to get, if you're a fan right now, don't get delusions of grandeur that this is a elite team. I think we have talent. I don't think there are a lot of teams in the NFL that are way better than the Dolphins, but I don't feel like we're a team right now that's at the level of the Patriots or the Packers. And so I think in terms of what they're doing and where they're going, this is an average to an above average team. And so I expect them to be very competitive in all their games, and I expect them to be able to win against teams like Houston. I think they are a better team right now because of the injuries and stuff in the quarterback situation. We should be able to beat the Houston Texans. And so when we play a team like that, I expect them to play well. Now, if you're expecting them to dominate the Patriots, in New England, I think that might be, that's asking a lot of any football team. But so my thought is in terms of a fan, look for where they're going, what they're doing, and look for them just to play competitive football. That's what we've been wanting for a long time.
Anything for you, Efren?
No, not really. That's about it. I think I saw that Damian Williams is returning kicks now instead of Landry, so that's interesting.
Yeah, Damian Williams.
He was in the game, so Damian Williams hasn't looked explosive, unfortunately.
No,
so I'm a little disappointed, and I think that's probably why you're seeing Jonas Gray get worked in a little bit. But obviously, probably the long-term answer for the second half of the season will be try to get
Ajayi
incorporated in there. So at least in our situation, it's not like, as I thought about that after that Titans game, I'm like, wow, if we lose Lamar Miller, like if he hurts his knee or something, that's going to significantly impact our ability to run the football. And so it's going to be vital to have another explosive running back, because I don't think it's realistic to expect Lamar Miller to pound the ball 20-25 carries a game and be healthy throughout the whole season. So it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, hopefully Ajayi will be back and we'll be able to see if he can bring some extra depth to this running back position. I said over and over again that I see Damian Williams as a Darren Sproles type weapon, not so much as an all-around running back. So if we use Sproles as a receiver out of the back, I'm sorry, I just said Sproles. If we use Williams out of the backfield like a Sproles, then I think Williams can be really good, because he has the ability to make catches out of the backfield and even line up at wide receiver every once in a while, because he's that kind of a weapon. As a running back, it seems no, but he can be a weapon. We just have to use him properly. But at this point, I'm willing to see what Ajayi can do, because so far it seems like it's either Jonas Gray or him, because Williams is not doing well as a running back.
No, but at least we have the players. That's what I was leading earlier, where teams that fire their coaches and are in the bottom, a lot of times they're devoid of talent. And just keep in mind, we have not even really used Ajayi or Devontae Parker yet. And within like 3 or 4 games, we could come out with a game plan featuring some guys that are extremely explosive that teams may not see coming. So they have a lot of tools to work with. It could be exciting.
Well, once Parker gets consistent, that's even Campbell saying that much, so we can't just assume that was just a Philbin thing. Even Campbell's the one saying that.
Yeah, I'm not going to criticize them with the way Rashard Matthews and Jarvis Landry are playing, that I would pull those guys out of the game just to get Parker in there. But I do think you can design a few plays during the game, especially if we're running the ball effectively, to slip Parker in there, and he doesn't have to know everything that well to know just you're going to go deep one-on-one and we're going to throw the ball up. We want to see if you can make a play on it. That's what I'm looking for.
He played 5 snaps, and I think 4 of them were run plays. So
yeah, exactly. They're not really in there. But if the Dolphins are running that football like they have been, teams are going to come up, to force them. You can't just let them do it. You got to adjust. And so I feel like we will get some scenarios where Parker will get some one-on-one looks, and talk about being able to blow open a game or change it. If you can hit him down the field 40 or 50 yards on a jump ball, that completely will throw off the defense and what they're trying to do. So anyway, that's something you might see in the near future. Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this show. We ran for about an hour and a half, so that's pretty much it. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Hopefully, the intensity continues. Hopefully, Dan Campbell can make sure these guys stay focused and don't start patting themselves on the back, like he said, and wind up losing all their intensity and suddenly doing that stuff. We want these teams to stay competitive. We want this team to stay intense. We want them to stay energetic, passionate, and that's what Dan Campbell's here for. He's not here to be a genius. He's just here to make sure that these players are ready to play on Sunday. And hopefully, for the Web Weekenders, they'll be able to put on a good show and give us a reason to be happy about it once we leave. Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us for this show. If you want, you can download the show on SoundCloud, and you can watch it on the go, or you can watch it here on YouTube or on the PhinManiacs.com website. We have news coming out every day. We have writers, Efren Ramos, myself, Chad Ronenbaum, Eldon Jensen, Matthew Kanata. We have writers coming out of our ears. We're always keeping an eye on what's going on with the team and making sure that everybody gets all their news right there. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you all next time on the PhinManiacs.com podcast.